so it's 6 o'clock. I'm going to just go ahead and get this started and welcome everybody to this, well, the first one I can ever think of us doing, this Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Zoom event for Arizona Public Media, looking back at 1 year of the pandemic and what life has been like. And it's been crazy for those of you who are kind of eavesdropping in on our conversation as we're getting going. But before we get into that, let me do some introductions. My name is Christopher Conover, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a reporter and at AZPM for radio, a little TV, less so in the last year, but hopefully that'll change again. And also host of The Buzz, our weekly radio show, diving deep into all kinds of things, recently explaining what the legislature is doing, or doing our best to explain what they're doing. Joining me is, who's been my partner in crime before, Lorraine Rivera, host of Arizona 360, kind of the sister show to The Buzz on TV. On the other side of me on my screen, I don't know how we're lining up on your screens, is Tom McNamara, host of Arizona Illustrated on our TV side. And then finally, in the bottom of my screen, but not in the bottom of our hearts, Tony Paniagua.
Good one.
Who, Tony and I have been at AZPM. I've been there 6 months longer than he has. We were there when they laid the foundation of the building, I believe. At least that's the way sometimes it feels. He's a reporter for Arizona 360 right now, but also Arizona Illustrated. So he gets to work a lot with Lorraine and Tom. And we want your questions. Please post them. That's really what we're here to do. Not just talk about our experiences amongst ourselves, but we want to hear from you all. We've got an hour or so to do that. And let me start off just by kind of priming the pump a little. Before this began publicly, we were all talking about what a difference a year makes for Zoom. We all now know that we're supposed to unmute ourselves. We don't always, but we try. Tom, what's it been like adjusting as a TV host to the world of Zoom?
Crash course. Yeah, I was mentioning before we officially got going this evening, but thank goodness for my daughters who are all college age and beyond and very tech savvy. And being a late adapter, and I'm not a techno guy, I have to be dragged kicking and screaming sometimes into these things. So, last spring I started getting involved in Zoom meetings, and then eventually we segued into some forums that we did, for example, one on the Bighorn Fire, and university officials were involved and all, and I had all hands on deck helping me learn the technology and get things going in the right direction so I wouldn't have a Zoom disaster. And so of necessity, I have learned the technology now. And it's a good thing because it's so much more a part of life now.
It really is. And Lorraine, you've, like the rest of us, been working a lot from home. We even, and people may not realize this, had a studio set up at your house for a while. I think AZPM converted your dining room.
It did, which worked out because we weren't hosting any gatherings, of course, because of the pandemic. We just moved all the gear out here in the last couple of weeks, and we're shooting the show from the studio, which I'm not sure if everyone knows, but we're located at the U of A, in the U of A campus, in the basement of Modern Languages, for those of you who are familiar with the area. But it has been a transition, and I echo much of what Tom has said, that it's tricky, and thankfully we have a support team at the office, but here at home, who can help kind of guide some of those technical aspects. Tony is somebody that he and I see eye to eye when it comes to technology. We've shared a lot of fun stories together, and we still have challenges, and we always will, and that's okay, because I like to say we have old souls. So that's my excuse for not being able to keep up with the tech that we're expected to these days. But thank goodness for it, because otherwise I don't know how we would have been able to function. And I assume we'll talk about this, but kiddos being in school, being able to perform your work, thank goodness for technology, because I think it's really been a game changer for a lot of us.
Yeah, I definitely want to come back to that, but I want to make sure that we do recognize Tony before we go too far down. Tony, what's it been like? You've been out in the field more than a lot of us, but I know you've had your fair share because I've been on a lot of the meetings with you, Zoom meetings and things like that.
It's been a lot of fun, and like Lorraine mentioned and Tom mentioned, it's been a learning experience for us, and I think the whole world. I don't know how many people had heard of Zoom prior to the pandemic. I know I may have heard about it somewhere in my periphery, but never with the intent and with the dedication that we've had over the past year. I have to say kudos to Andrea Corona, and other people here at the station who have made our transition very smoothly. Just as a matter of fact, she was working with me a few seconds before we went on because I was pushing the wrong button or doing something wrong. But she got us in, and here we are. It's been a lot of fun. And we mentioned working in the Modern Languages building, Lorraine did, and that's where I am. I'm based in Modern Languages in the basement, and I see Lorraine here a lot. I also see Cassandra Lau, the producer of Arizona 360. So in order for us to put together these television stories, we have to show up. We have to go out with photographers and get these interviews and then put these pieces together and make them shine, make them good, make them informative for you, the audience. So it's been a lot of fun, and I enjoy coming into work. I haven't not had any work from home days.
Yeah, and that's been the big difference, because I was certainly before the pandemic doing, stories for Arizona 360, sometimes more than other times, but they shifted me heavily to radio with the buzz going on and all of that. And we shifted totally to online. Our wonderful producer of the buzz, who I'm going to give a shout out to, Ariana Brocious, who's leaving us. She announced it publicly today. We've known for a while, but she announced it publicly today. She's leaving us to go to a wonderful environmental podcast that she's going to be producing. But, we used to sit next to each other. Lorraine and I sat across from each other, kick each other under the desk kind of thing. I haven't seen either of them in person really in a year. I guess Lorraine and I saw each other on election night because we were both in the studio. But yeah, we did the buzz. The buzz is taped. For those of you who are listeners, this is the new Buzz studio and has been for the last year. Every interview is done right at this desk. Every voice track you hear. And yeah, it was a learning curve. There are jokes within the NPR community about when you're in the field and in hotels and voicing things, you build pillow forts and put blankets over your head to deaden the sound. I'm not going to say I haven't been in that boat in the last year sitting at this desk. Now we have some soundproofing that we put up, but it was a big, big change. We have our first question, actually, and it comes from Kent, and he says, how do you cope with issues related to attempt to, to Christianize all aspects of our culture? And, this raises an interesting question, and it's when people, I think, push agendas on us as anchors, as reporters. And, I'll start with you, Lorraine. How do you deal with people when they're pushing an agenda, be it a Christian agenda or anything else?
Well, at the core of what we do, and you all know this, is journalism. You stick to the facts, you report the story. And one of the things that I think journalists need to have is common sense. And you can see when there's an attempt to try and sway you one way or another. And you have to focus on the facts and getting the story to the public. So there are some challenging conversations that have to take place when that occurs, but you can't go wrong if you stick with the facts and you tell a true story. I mean, at the core, that is what we do. And I've worked with Tony and Tom for many years, and of course with you, Christopher. And this is the sort of thing that keeps us grounded, right? You always go back to the fundamentals, and that's our work.
Yeah, and Lorraine, you and I both taught in the journalism school, and that's something that we really, from the earliest days, start talking with our students about, start pounding into our students. It's all about the facts. your opinion or our opinion doesn't matter. It's all about the facts and good facts. Just because somebody is saying it doesn't mean it's a fact. I do love a good fact check after all. But, dealing with all of this for a year, and Lorraine, I'm going to come back to you because you brought it up. You're the one on this screen who has little kids at home, and I'll brag on them. They're wonderful. We all know them because they swing by when we were all allowed to go outside and play, as I like to say. They would come by the studio every once in a while. Your kids are great. How did you deal with working from home, trying to do a serious news show with kids?
Yeah, it's tricky. As many of you know, kids were learning from home, and mine were as well for a time, and you have to coordinate schedules. There was a moment where I realized I could only do interviews during certain timeframes. I was very grateful to the team at AZPM that has continued to support me in that role as well. But we would have a crew who would come over. Sometimes it was one or two people who would help, set the camera and be sure that equipment was where it needed to be and to be available for all those things that can go wrong in TV. And thankfully, the work that we do is recorded for Arizona 360. So we could always make a fix if we had to, but it's just a careful balance. And for the families who are out there listening, that you have to coordinate schedules. I know, Tom, your children are older than mine, but you have a calendar, you write things down, and you communicate. And that's what we've got to do in this business, but also at home, because everyone had to get a job done, whether it's the kids for school or our spouses getting to work. You just had to lean on each other, and no surprises, lots of communication about the needs to get the work done. Tom, anything you want to add to that?
Well, our hats off to you, because my wife, Susan, said to me more than once during this first year of COVID, thank goodness our kids are grown up now, because what in the world would you do with them? You can't bring them out anywhere. You can't bring them on play dates or to activities or birthday parties or even to school. And what are you going to do with kids, even swimming pools? So, we sort of shared that thought more than once through the pandemic. So my hat's off to you, for getting through it. Having said that, my daughter's being older now. I have two daughters who missed graduations last year, one of whom was a high school senior, and that one really stung. There went the prom, there went the parties, the social activities, and the graduation. And it was very upsetting to her. It was hard to watch her. She really kept a stiff upper lip, but she was a trooper, but it really hit her hard. And my college graduate, not so much. She was, whatever, and marched on, started a corporate career from a couple of bedrooms away from me now. And she spent the first 6-7 months of her career with a large national company based in the bedroom, and just kind of rolled with it and did very well. So I think I had it a little easier than you did in many respects, Lorraine, but I think so many parents are and were going through this.
Lorraine, did you have did either of your kids, did you have the Zoom moment where, and granted 360's tape, so it would have been able to be fixed, but did either of them attempt, either on purpose or accidentally, to get in the show?
I took a photo of my little one very early on when I had to bring her with me because her early learning center had shut its doors. And so I had told her that she needed to sit still, and we had an interview. She's very young, so she didn't want to sit in the newsroom by herself. So she sat in the studio, but when the interview was over, she came and she stood behind me. And I took this picture of her because I thought, what were you thinking? I'm going to show this to you when you're working one day. I don't bug you. But there was another instance here in our home, which I will not forget. It was the same day that I was interviewing Mark Kelly and Martha McSally, and my kiddos were having lunch, and I said, I have a couple of really important appointments coming up, so I need you girls to be quiet. And one of them said, she's 5, she said, I'm Mark Kelly and I approve this message. And I couldn't help but laugh because, as you all know, despite the pandemic, the elections continued, right? And so did the commercial ads. And I'm not saying she watches a lot of TV, but there was a lot of TV ads with Mark Kelly and Martha McSally during the campaign. And that was funny because my older one said, well, who are you interviewing? And so I had said, and the little one just quipped, I'm Mark Kelly and I approve this message. And I shared that with both Mark Kelly and Martha McSally. And, they laughed, they thought it was funny. But those are those things that humanize us in our work because we're managing these stresses that you all are as well.
Tony, because you were the one reporter who was out a lot. I mean, all of the stories you've been doing for 360 pretty much been out in the field. What's it been like to be out in the field, more or less? I mean, I've seen the pictures, I've seen the video. You were a long way apart from the people you were interviewing, but more or less face to face with people for the last year through the highs and the lows of the COVID numbers. You're muted, by the way. And I knew we were going to get to say that. I'm so happy. It's officially a Zoom thing.
Oh, you caught me. Okay. I didn't want to risk anything going off while other people were speaking. But it's been quite interesting because I have sort of a format letter that I send to people when I introduce myself, when I want to interview them. Hi, my name is Tony Paniagua. I work at Arizona Public Media, the NPR PBS affiliate, et cetera, et cetera. We want to talk to you about this. We've had to add different lines, and I know Lorraine knows this and everybody else knows this. We will be practicing social distancing guidelines. We won't be touching you. We'll be wearing masks as we're going to be inside. If we're going to be speaking outside, it is up to you whether we wear masks or not, but we are keeping the 6-foot difference. And this wasn't planned, Christopher, but I have a little bit of a show and tell. So this is, this is a lav mic, all right? So this is what we normally put on a person when we are going to interview them. It attaches to their collar or somewhere on their suit or their dress, whatever they have to be wearing. And this requires touch, if you will. It requires that the photographer or I have this and then put it on the person. Lately, we've been using this monster. This is a boom mic right here. I don't know how familiar you guys are with this out there in the public that is watching. So this comes along with this cover. It's a windscreen, Fuzzy, the kitty, Fido, whatever you want to call it, and goes over this. And then the photographer, people like John DeSoto or Bob Lindbergh, they'll put these mics on a stand, like a tripod, and they are so effective that the people
Let me tune back in here so that
touch anything. So that works out really well. And that way we've all
just keep
maintained our social distancing, and it's been quite effective. So yeah, there have been some changes.
I wonder if people post to
Yeah,
panels.
lots of changes to the way we operate. On the radio side, as I was saying, we haven't been going out much, but we have we call them the fish poles, and they're just really long poles that we can put microphones on the end of, so we can do the same thing, and stay distant. Somebody brings up an interesting question here. What are the best ways or sources to find new stories? And I know that's been particularly hard for me because I spend my weekends and even my days, when we're working, out talking to people and, just wandering around festivals and seeing what's going on and just talking to people. So it's been a lot harder to find things. What are some of the tricks you all have done to try and find stories at this time?
Well, I think it's fair to say there's no shortage of material right now. I mean,
Right.
Every industry, every aspect of our society is affected by the pandemic. And for me as a mom who's working, I mean, the struggle that I have is probably similar to 98% of the other moms out there. And, I think Tom and Tony, we had been, our faces have been part of this market for a while now, that people see you and they just feel compelled to tell you what they're thinking or feeling, which is usually appreciated. I mean, that certainly plays into some of the discussion when you come back and think, what should we talk about on this week's show? Tom?
Well, it's been such a tsunami, though. You didn't have to find the story for the last year. It found you. Uh, any of us, we've all been in the business a number of years now, and there's always been a niche, health and science reporting. Well, so many mainstream reporters this year have been turned into health reporters and science reporters very suddenly and overwhelmingly. And typically when you report on these matters, you're following a piece of research or a scientific breakthrough. It's measured, it's compact, there are updates, it's manageable. Here comes this tsunami that's so murky that even the experts you speak with don't really have clarity on everything like they wish they would. And so in this past year, it's been a real delicate balance, a tightrope act to be able to get out there, find out information, tap the experts. And we're very fortunate to be so tied in with the U of A, the scientists, the doctors who are a part of this research and effort to defeat COVID. So it more or less found us in the industry this past year. And I don't know if this will ever happen again, but you hope COVID doesn't or nothing like it. But I admire the people who did put their own health on the line, put their personal interests aside, and have just done battle this past year. They've done a terrific job, and it ain't over yet, as they say.
Exactly.
That's right. I'll have to say something about that too. And it has not only been COVID, as you, Christopher Conover, know quite well, being the political reporter at the station. So obviously we had lots of election stories. We have immigration, we have the border. We live in a region that is full of stories that can be done. We have the environment, water issues, COVID, the border, the fence, the construction, whether you agree with it or not, and so on. So we're actually blessed to work in this industry here in Southern Arizona. Mexico is our neighbor. We have California on the west. So many people move here from other states and countries. So it provides a lot of possibilities for really fascinating stories.
Tom, you're in thinking about what you were saying about all of a sudden we all became science and health reporters. I got lucky, if you will, when it came to the vaccine and even the virus, and mutations and things like that. My wife is a wildlife geneticist, so mRNA and viruses and all of that is something she understands. So we have had some amazing conversations as I've been reading things or people I've been interviewing have said things. I could go get her and say, what does this mean? What, how do I ask this question, and things like that. So I've been really lucky in that way, especially because she's just one room away. Her office is just right there now. So it's been really lucky. Question here, what do we all think will remain a part of our operations and maybe even the world outside as restrictions lift and maybe things start getting back to something akin to normal? Yeah, I know one thing, at least from a radio standpoint, reporting standpoint, is we've been able to reach out with good quality sound to a whole new level of people. It's been great to be able, you could always on radio do a phone interview, but we all know sometimes phones don't sound the best, but Zoom calls, and we use some other technology, and people are now so used to it that to call experts from around the world, frankly, is now really easily. It's just a time zone issue, and we can get quality audio and even pretty quality video these days. So I think that's been a great change that we will continue to do, at least for the buzz and even some of our day-to-day reporting.
It's my impression, just more as an observer than a reporter, that interviews have gotten better in general because of the distance. People, I think, will say things on a Zoom hookup that they may not say if you're standing right there with the microphone right in their face. And I'll give you a good example. After the women's NCAA basketball games, these girls are great and they're polished enough, but little Ari McDonald, that superstar of a basketball player, they interview her clear across the court. with the boom mic, the big one that Tony held up earlier. And I mean, these interviews have been so terrific with Ari and with other players. They're not set upon by the media. I think the same with anyone in any walk of life. I think it's just less threatening. And I think in general, interviews have gotten better and will continue to be done this way to a large degree and will keep getting better.
I hope not. Now, I understand the value, but for TV, unfortunately, quality really matters. And we've had some wonderful interviews with terrific Zoom connections, but there are other instances where it doesn't work. And
Right.
you miss that level of intimacy when you're interviewing somebody and talking to them and understanding which direction they might head. One of the things that I don't know if it will continue or if it will go away, but the fist bumps and the masks, I think I'm not fond of being in a situation where I have to shake 30 hands. Makes me a little uneasy just for personal health, but I'm glad that now we can just give each other a what's up with the eyebrows or a fist pump. Hip bumps was something that didn't really get any traction. I'm joking, okay? But those are things that, I wonder as we move forward, when we're not feeling well, for example, where you're not well enough to make it into the office, can you Zoom into a meeting? Or can a kid go to school virtually instead of going in and potentially infecting their classmates? Those are those things that I think we've learned something from it and we can gain from this experience, but I don't know what the next step holds because so much of this has been very different for every aspect of our life.
Yeah, and the learning's been interesting. I took a 3-day intensive coding class to do some investigative work. And normally I would have taken that in person, and it was all Zoom, which was great because I was still able to do it, but it was different. It was definitely different, and I'm not, young like your kids, Lorraine, by any means, because I hope your kids don't have this much gray hair already, so it was different. It was definitely a different thing, but at the same time, I miss, looking someone really in the eye during an interview. And as the political reporter, normally I'm up bumping around the legislative halls on and off. I haven't been in the legislature now in over a year. And so I only can really report on what they're doing publicly and online. It's harder to do because I can't just stand in the corner and talk to somebody who can give me a tip about what's going on and then go chase it down to see if it's legit and things like that. So yeah, it's been different. I mean, the Zoom is nice, especially for radio, because we can get some really good quality audio, but there's nothing like that in person, face to face, because when we interview people, we end up making relationships, even if they're only for 10 minutes. And that's been lost.
Sure. Yeah, there is a time and a place for that. I agree. I was speaking generally before, but yeah, that intimacy and that, like you say, especially up against the politicians or whoever, you almost have to be. The people that do it all the time, I think the people who don't do it all the time have been giving wonderful interviews via Zoom and elsewhere. But there's a time and place for both. Yeah.
And I'll bring something up, Christopher. One of the fascinating things about this whole new world is that organizations such as the Children's Museum of Tucson, Tucson Audubon, and different Tucson Museum of Art, for example, they're all learning about the importance of Zoom, and they are actually going to incorporate it into their affairs moving forward. So, for example, they, in some cases, have expanded their audiences because people in other cities and other states or countries are able to participate in some of their meetings or some of their functions. Of course, it is not the same thing as visiting in person, but at least we had the technology. Had this happened, let's say 30 or 40 years ago, had this pandemic been around then, it would have been a very different story. I think it really would have shut off a lot of people from their loved ones and working. So in a way, many people, if you study technology or you're interested in that field, I'm sure there's going to be lots of job openings moving forward with that.
Absolutely. Let me answer one little housekeeping question. Someone asked, what time is the buzz on? It's on 8:30 Friday morning, 6 o'clock Friday night. and 3:30 Friday afternoon on 89.1. And Lorraine, I'll let you give the times for 360, and Tom, I'll let you give the times for and Arizona Illustrated. You're going to need to write this down. It's on a bunch. So,
Right. Lorraine, you want to go first?
The first airing of Arizona 360 is Friday night at 8:30 on PBS 6. Actually, the first airing is Friday night in Phoenix at 6:30 on KAT World 8. And then we air here in the Tucson or Southern Arizona region. And then there are some encore presentations on Sunday morning and Monday evening. And you can check your local listing. It kind of depends on where you live, but you can always go online to see our materials as well.
yeah, all of our stuff is always online, all 3 shows. And Tom,
Yeah.
I know how I watch Arizona Illustrated, which is usually online, so I couldn't tell you when it's on TV.
Yeah, it's moved around a little bit during the week, but the big times are Sunday evening, the first run episode, 6:30 p.m. on KUAT, Arizona Public Media. Then that same show you see on Sunday is repeated the following Saturday at 6:30, which makes it easier. And then I think the easiest way to see it is on demand, azpm.org.
Okay, this has got to be possibly the quintessential COVID-19 pandemic question. Who makes the best banana bread? I'm going to volunteer my wife or Andrea Corona on our staff, but I'll let you, the 3 of you, fight it out on who makes the best banana bread. And I want to put a caveat on it. Did anybody try sourdough to make it? We tried, not so. We weren't so successful.
I'll start with that answer. For me, the oven is the place where I store pots and pans, and that's where it ends. So take it away, Lorraine or Tom.
Yeah, I pass. I mean, I'm not quite sure where this question came from, but I do like to say things are bananas when they're just, beyond comprehension for me. So then I will follow it up with, I think it's time to make banana bread. I don't know if that's where the quip is, but I like to bake, but there has to be nuts in the banana bread. And Tony, anytime you want to bring it in, I will try it.
All right.
All right.
And baked goods around here are supplied by my oldest daughter, who loves to make brownies and lemon poppy seed bread. So we're okay.
Hey, Christopher, I'm not sure if you're all able to see this, but there was a question here about Arizona Public Media's role in providing public education, given some of the challenges that we're seeing right now. And, one of the things that I'm really proud of that we can continue to do, and I think we talked about this before the conversation tonight, but not hitting those paywalls when you're trying to get really important information about what we're doing with the information we're reporting, because it is unfortunate when people aren't able to keep up because you hit a paywall or you don't have access to the internet or television or radio. And one thing that I'm very proud of here is that we have a variety of platforms so people can get their information regardless of their circumstances. So that is a commitment to education. I would think that a lot of other places would try to do that as much as possible, but that's something that I think we do in this market, and that's something to be proud of.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with that. I'm sorry, Lorraine or Christopher, but if you go to our website, Arizona Public Media, and I'm on there right now because I know about this. If you go to the tabs, you'll see home, TV, radio, news, events, and education. And there's lots of wonderful opportunities for learning there. PBS Learning Media Tips, PBS Teacher Planning Kits, and so on. And I would just have to also say that our programs are educational. Many of the shows many of the segments that we do for Arizona Illustrated, for 360, for The Buzz are in themselves educational. For example, I know that at Arizona Illustrated, there are stories about places like Catalina State Park and Picacho Peak and about local artists. So if you are at home with your family and you want to watch some great programming about Southern Arizona, about the wonderful people and places, this is a great place to go to.
Yeah, and that is so true. The stories that Lorraine and I tend to concentrate on, because we are the news shows, are news, and they can be very educational. I was very long ago and very far away an education major in college. So I look at a lot of what I do as I just have a really big classroom now, but I don't have to take attendance and do grades. So, that's a plus. But, when you go over to Arizona Illustrated, you can learn so much about our community, from the arts to the environment and all of that. And it's just so, it's beautifully shot and edited. And, it's not the news of the week, but it's not supposed to be. It's, and it's just a beautiful show that introduces you. If you're new to Arizona, there's a reason we call it Arizona Illustrated. It introduces you to our community and so many aspects of it in a really beautiful way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're very lucky. There aren't many outlets like AZPM left around the country and in the state of Arizona. To be able to do a program like that is a real thrill and a luxury these days because no one else is doing it. It's great. Yeah.
Exactly. There's an interesting question here, and let me do one more housekeeping thing because they said I said it too quickly. The Buzz is on Friday morning at 8:30, Friday night at 6, and then Saturday at 3:30 p.m. And then always online. We post the show Friday morning, and you can also catch it on iTunes and NPR One and all kinds of places like that. Just search for The Buzz Arizona. The Buzz Arizona. Yeah, didn't want to mess that up. It's only the end of the show for 3 years. So someone asked here, is there much competition between the four of us, the three shows, for getting stories and covering events? I'll start it. No, I mean, we all work together. Lorraine and I, even though we don't sit across from each other now, we talk a lot on our internal messaging systems, trading information. If we're both working on a similar story, or if we know one is working on something else and something crosses your desk about it, pass it along. I was working on a story today that I needed a response from the governor's office, and Cassandra Lau, the wonderful producer for Arizona 360, pinged me with a question about that story and said, oh, I just reached out to the governor's office to get a comment regarding this. I said, great, let me know when you get it. We won't deluge them. We'll just share the information. And it worked out. It was a very efficient way to work. Tony passes stories to us via email because we all get different emails. We pass stories back and forth all the time. I don't know how you all feel, but I'll say I don't feel any competition, except when Lorraine does something really good. I feel like I got to go out and do it now too, but
Christopher, I will also add that one of the wonderful things about working here at Arizona Public Media is that we are trusted to make some really good decisions about what we think is a story. And of course, I can't just do a story without letting anybody know what my plans are. I speak to Lorraine, I speak to Cassandra Lau, the producer of Arizona 360. And of course, we have other people that we answer to. But for example, just a week ago, we did a story about the drought. And that's because I had heard from John Weens, who retired from the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum, about the devastation that's occurring in the desert. And I called him up and he said, yes, we'd be willing to talk to you about this. And he also talked about a friend of his who is a rancher in the Patagonia area, southeast of Tucson. I spoke to Lorraine, I spoke to Cassandra Lau and other people, and they said, yes, okay, we go forward with that. And that's a luxury, as Tom was saying earlier, speaking of luxuries of working in the television industry where you are trusted to make some decisions. We have all been here many, many years. And when we come across a story that we think is worthwhile telling to other people, we are usually trusted. There are sometimes we can't do every story that is pitched to us, but there's a lot of trust and discussion moving forward with those possible ideas.
Well, good, and that's exactly it. We are competitive with each other in the sense of, well, if somebody did something good, I guess I better get up and do something good too. But yeah, we do work together, and that's part of the trust that Tony was talking about that we have. And we have an advantage at Arizona Public Media, I think, that no place else certainly in town has, and there aren't many places in the country, because we are radio and TV, and we do local programming on radio and TV. sometimes a great story comes along and it's just beautiful. So we send it to Arizona Illustrated because they can do it best, you know, or sometimes we need it handled a little differently. So it comes over to the news side and you can decide which of our platforms, Arizona Illustrated, Arizona 360, The Buzz, and our online, which platform will serve that story the best to get it out to you all, our consumers. And there are plenty of stories. I'll tell you, you know, if you listen on the radio side, we do at the top of the hour, you know, very short newscast. Story length in there averages about 45 seconds. Well, if you go read the web version, it's got multiple quotes in it and maybe maps or charts or things like that, because that's a better way to present that story on that platform. So even what you see or hear on our broadcast isn't always what you get online, because we use the platforms as we can. Another question here. Let's see here. I have to move my window so I can read it. And we've all had these, I think, in the last year. But throughout the pandemic, we've heard incredible stories of resilience, connection, and community. What have you all seen in the course of your reporting or in the course here of our everyday life for the last year that falls into those categories?
Tom, I'm going to go to you. Well, I think.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
Tom, I think you should take this while I think for a second.
You know, I think we've seen all of the above, you know, both in media and in life, whatever. I got a kick out of the way a lot of the local restaurants came together over the course of COVID, you know, in its acute stage. And it's not to say that it's over, but the early months and into the summer. And these local restaurants were consistently feeding the healthcare workers, the doctors and nurses and technicians, literally coming to the rescue and propping these people up who had been in battle already for months, weeks and months, at great personal sacrifice. And that was one of the local efforts that really stood out as being so far above and beyond. The first responders and everyone, the staff of so many places, including the university, and the way the university has stepped up now to join in the COVID vaccination effort. And it's everywhere you look in this community. Tucson has always been a helpful, you know, loving, big embrace community. And it really came forward during this last year, everywhere you look.
Lorraine, do you have long?
One of the things that I think I'll remember from all this is we still had an election, you know, federal, I mean, state, local. I mean, there have been things that have continued to operate because we had to. It's part of our democracy. Working with healthcare professionals who we know they're busy saving lives, but then they took the time to communicate an important message. And those stories are near and far. One of the areas that's near and dear for me is just seeing how resilient teachers have been, because I spent some time in a school when I was earning my master's in educational leadership, and to see what teachers do on a day-to-day basis when children are in the classroom, but then to imagine how they're managing their own personal health, their families, and then having to completely reroute their curriculum to an online platform. I think we've really proven that, you know, we're tough, we can do it, but it's come at a cost. And I hope that at one point we'll be able to take a breath and look back and think, all right, I learned something from this. I don't necessarily want to go back to all of it, but we're better because of it. And so I'm grateful that in this particular industry, we're able to see all walks of that, from law enforcement to healthcare to government. I mean, the list goes on. Even, you know, in our newsroom, we're able to continue churning out material because we have to. We know that people rely on it.
And I'll add to that. I'll just say that we do come across some fascinating people who are doing their part to try to help others. A couple of weeks ago, we went to Gila County. I was there with photographer Nate Huffman and production assistant Andrea Corona, and we met some fascinating people. One of them being a woman who works for the federal government, lives in Tucson, and she went to different locations here in Tucson because she wanted to volunteer with the vaccination process at the different pods. And they said, thank you so much for coming out here, but we have all the volunteers that we need. So she drove more than 100 miles north to the community of Globe. And she said, hey, can you use me? And they said, please, yes, you're welcome to stay. And she did. And the time we visited, she had been there for 3 full weekend days. So it's really inspirational to see how people are coming together. I know there's a lot of division, there's a lot of disagreement about many things in our world at the moment, but it's nice to see that people really truly care about others and are doing their part to try to help them out.
You know, one of the ones that really struck me was, and it's hard to believe that it happened during the pandemic, was the Bighorn Fire, which was last June, which, you know, so much of Tucson got to watch. I watched it right from my backyard, and it was amazing, you know, watching the work of the wildland firefighters and the tankers and the helicopters coming in. But as it crept down the mountains and was getting closer and closer to homes, here we are in the middle of a pandemic. People really don't want to go out and travel. And I started seeing messages on neighborhood, you know, message boards and things like that. People offering up, you know, if you know someone who lives in the foothills and they're going to have to evacuate, but they don't want to go to hotels because of the pandemic, I have a rental home, or I have, you know, a guest house behind my house that's empty and clean. If they would like to come and stay there free, you know, we don't, you know, we have to take care of our community. And it was kind of like, yeah, we have a wildfire, which is can be a devastating, you know, disaster on top of a pandemic at the same time. And I just saw Tucson step right up once again, you know, and do what people could. And of course, you know, I was up there covering that and saw lots of people dropping off things for the wildland firefighters. They were based out of Catalina State Park, and people were bringing in pallets of water and the banana bread and things like that for those men and women who were out in the heat. We all know what it's like in June and July here, you know, and standing, you know, in a fire zone. It's that much hotter. So yeah, that was one of the amazing things that I think will always stick with me, you know, during this, you know, memories of all of this. When things start to return to normal, which could be coming sooner now that vaccines largely across the state are open to people over the age of 16. We have a couple of counties where it's 18, 2 counties where it's still 55 plus. But as things start to come back, we now have close to 20% of everybody double vaccinated. Numbers grow every day. What do you think it's going to look like out there, since we've all been in here for a year, when we're all finally allowed to go back out?
Well, I think, you know, I think lifestyles have changed as a result of this. We've had a full year to adapt, and I think there's going to be more outdoor recreation, perhaps more solitary time and recreation, like hiking and things like that. I think, you know, you get out for a meal, it tastes better than it did a year ago. You can go to a restaurant again comfortably. And I think people are going to be a little more selective about when they go out and where, much like going to the store. You know, is it worth the hassle with the mask and the this and the that, you know, or do I want to wait till Friday and then I'll do it all at once, you know, kind of thing. I think our lifestyles have really skewed permanently. And that also goes to the topic of working from home. That's going to be a bigger thing now. Meeting like we are right now is certainly, it was getting there. Now it's going to be, I think, even bigger. This just catapulted it to the forefront. And, you know, we'll make it work, and we'll make it work for the better going forward.
I don't know. I mean, it remains to be seen. I think some of what Tom said could become a reality, but another piece just will depend on our human behavior and what we what we need when we think we come out of this. I can appreciate what you say, Tom, about that family component, because an instance like tonight would have been tricky for me, working all day, picking up the kids, getting them home and fed, coming home, going back to the station. I would much rather do this because it allows me to play both roles, right? A wife, a mom, and an employee. And those are the kinds of things that I hope managers, especially as, you know, as we continue to get out of this, will just have more consideration for their staff. And I really want to express a heartfelt thanks to all those people who could not work from home, who had to show up every day. And I admire you for keeping those gas stations and grocery stores and drugstores running, because those were critical work. Those were critical jobs during this. And I'm grateful that we, you know, as a community, I think we saw that, but I hope we don't forget it, because that was important for us.
And I'll add that moving forward, as things do begin to open up in safe situations, for example, outdoor restaurants and so on, if we can, let's do our part and support these businesses, especially the local businesses here in Southern Arizona and other locations, because they have really been struggling and they are ready for us if it's safe, when it's safe. And it would be nice for us to show our support to them, because a lot of people have been really struggling and trying to make a living. And on that note, earlier that time you were talking about the new reality, I was talking to the executive director of the Children's Museum, and she says, you know, we did the bump thing when we went out there a few days ago. She says, you know, I really miss hugging people, because I think a lot of people know in Southern Arizona, people tend to hug more so than in other cultures. And who knows if that's ever going to come back the way it used to be, but maybe we'll get to that point at some point in the future. But at least with our family members, with our close friends and relatives, we can still do that.
Interesting question here, and it goes a little bit to our craft, and all of us have been around for a long time. You know, I'm the newbie in Southern Arizona in this group, and I've been here 16 years. But we've been in the business, all of us, for a very long time. But this was an interesting question that I think was tested this year. As seasoned reporters in a difficult time, how hard has it been to not become too emotional or too involved with what we cover? And I'll kick that one off. Early on, through the help of a wonderful student employee we have, Vanessa Ontiveros, we were able to find the first student at the University of Arizona to be diagnosed with COVID-19. And this woman agreed to talk to us. And this was very, very early on. We still didn't know how things were going to go at all. And it was kind of hard to talk with her, because it was still such a mystery. And we were hearing so much about death at that point. You know, it was hard to talk to this young woman who in theory had her whole life ahead of her. And I shouldn't say in theory, she does. She recovered, she's fine. But, you know, that was a tough one, you know, to keep it focused and not be too emotional about it, but be understanding at the same time. And like I said, it was so early on. There were so many questions that none of us knew the answer to, that we now might have better answers for ourselves and for our community. But yeah, that was a tough one.
And I think one of the interesting aspects about covering stories during a pandemic is that we have all been impacted. So that does make it different from doing stories in the past when, for example, we showed up at the home of somebody with a terrible disease or who had experienced a horrific accident. We really could understand their story, but it wasn't like we were living their situation. And that has changed under COVID, because we all have friends or family members or other people that we have known who have either gotten the virus or passed away or gotten really sick. So this is a shared experience for the whole world. And I think that makes it especially poignant compared to previous stories that I've covered in the past.
Yeah, I've never covered a story that affected every person on the planet directly, more or less.
And as time goes on, it affects more and more people more directly. The last few times we spoke with my mother-in-law. It was through a window. It had nothing to do with COVID. She passed away in September. But the last few times we saw her and spoke with her was standing outside talking through a window into a nursing home where she was in bed. And, you just never know. And that was it. All year, people kept asking you, do you know anyone who's had COVID, anyone impacted? And at first it was like, no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden it was yes. And then it was multiple people and multiple families. And as time goes on, those numbers probably will increase until this vaccination can, well, we hope, send us in the other direction. So yeah, it's been profound, big time.
Yeah, I think it's like with anything that we do, it's never about us. And you have to remember that as a journalist. And there are things that make you uncomfortable and emotional, but you have to remain professional and steadfast through it all. I mean, that's what we want with most professions, especially when I think about healthcare. But it's hard not to have that human component given what's taken place here. It's just very important to remember that we have an important message we have to offer to the public, and you have to just keep focused on the task at hand. And it is easy to get caught up in emotions, but we have to ignore those to get that message out there. And it's been tricky. And Christopher, I can appreciate what you say about this is a story that has affected everyone. So maybe at the end of all this, we'll understand each other better.
We have about 4 minutes, and Lorraine, that was a great way to sum up all of this. But does anybody have any parting thoughts or words as we get close? Actually, I have less than 4 minutes as we get close to the end of our time here.
I'll briefly say that I really enjoyed having this opportunity to work, and I hope all of you out there take care of yourselves and be careful, and let's hope for that moment when we can all get back together under the new normal. In the meantime, enjoy the outdoors. I love walking every day, several miles. So if you're bored, if you don't know what to do, get out there and get some exercise.
Absolutely. Tom, do you have any parting thoughts for us?
Yeah, just stay well and hope, do the best you can to keep yourself healthy and those around you. And let's just hope the worst is over. Let's keep believing that and working toward that. I tend to believe it. I hope more and more people do and take the actions they need to keep going. We live in a great place. It's a wonderful life. Heard that before, in so many respects. And let's hope it stays that way for everyone and only gets better.
Well, I won't say exactly what you all said, but I certainly echo everything you all said. And as we wrap this up, to all of our viewers and listeners and readers online, we do all this for you all. And thank you for being there for us and allowing us to tell your stories, to the rest of the world, thanks to the internet, but certainly the rest of our community. And thank you so much for joining us tonight.